Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here because it's 14 years that I have not been in your capital. And when I went with Odur this morning to some places of memories, I can only tell you the city has dramatically changed. You know, it's no more the Reykjavik which I've seen 14 years ago. And I was really impressed by very many new quarters. The Wall Street with all its, let me say, negative or positive effects and impacts, leave it up to you. But I was extremely positively embarrassed by the strong amount of industrial activities which are here. Because everybody outside Iceland, at least in my home country, Germany, thinks, oh, they were just doing services on financial grounds and an industry doesn't belong. That's not true. And I can only encourage you, from the experiences we had in Germany, go ahead with industry. Don't think that a country full of pizza bakers will have a future. And services alone are nice, but will not be sufficient. That is very clear our message we had. And we also in Germany have to work very hard to keep things. Believe me, it's not everything gold what glitters. Now, I'm here and I have a very strange mandate being given by Sigrun. I don't know, you know what a CEO is? You know what a CTO is? Chief Technology Officer. You know what a CIO is? Chief Inspiration Officer. You won't believe it, but there are quite a few companies in Europe where you have already CIOs. It's not just a talk or a joke. So I try to inspire you. And what is better, today on the more or less 25th anniversary of the fall of the wall in Germany, to look a little on the history of the bioeconomy, because sometimes a very brief historical move backwards can give you very interesting insight into this famous back to the roots in order to have a better comprehension of what will be in the future. That is also one of my experiences of life. And I want to give you a short rundown how and why we arrived in the Commission in the year 2005, and we are going to celebrate next year the 10th anniversary of the European bioeconomy in September. How and why we arrived at this very strange knowledge-based bioeconomy, which today is more simplified as the bio-based economy or the bioeconomy. It was a time when the knowledge played an enormous role. We were talking about knowledge society, knowledge-based economy, etc. And it was the time where we were preparing for the next framework program. The sixth framework program was just going on, with a very poor performance for agriculture. The agriculture research and technology practically did not exist anymore. It was over. It was clearly killed by BSE. And I had not a single penny, not a single cent for the agriculture research in the sixth framework program. There was just a little so-called priority 8 money for the support of the agriculture policies. And then we had a very fierce discussion starting on GMOs in Europe, in Brussels. We had in the biotechnology the first big strategy for Europe, biotechnology, in the year 2002. And Commissioner Busquin started to establish technology platforms. That was the mood and the ambiente in which I took over, having been for 7 years the Director for Environment and Sustainability, one of these bad Kyoto boys and post-Kyoto boys. You know, that was the ambiente which surrounded me when I took over end of 2003. Well, one day I read in a report of the OECD Minister Council about several decisions in which the word bioeconomy appeared in a single phrase without any explanation, without any indication what it meant. And I asked my colleagues, what is it? And no one knew. And no one found out. There was no material on what was meant under bioeconomy in the OECD in the year 2002. And then we had a brainstorming session several times with my directorate, my head of units. How could we best prepare for the 7th framework program, which was supposed to start in the year 2007, but the preparations start already 2.5 years ago before, as you all know. And then we arrived at very, very simple generics or general deliberations, very simple one. We said to ourselves, we have collected a tremendous amount of knowledge on animals, on plants, on insects, and on microorganisms. What are we doing with it? Because everybody knew that the famous C, the carbonate, within the plants, the microorganisms, in their processing power, and also in the animals and also insects, would have tremendously interesting features which you don't find anywhere else in nature. Carbon neutrality, the potential for renewability, if you use it wisely in cascades, multiplicity in using, closeness to resources efficiency, and therefore also closeness to sustainability. And if you all took that together, we asked ourselves, very simple, why are we not thinking of a next step of our economy, which is so strongly dominated by fossils and which will going to continue, and try to introduce an economy which is mainly based on two elements, on renewable biological resources and the combination of new knowledge. The last one is now more or less forgotten, in the discussions, unfortunately. And don't forget, at that time, we were talking a lot on this knowledge society, as I said, on the impact of information technology, communication, on cognitive science, info, nano, cogno. That was the 3 words we used. And these were the 2 pillars. We think, why are we not trying to build something up, an economy which would have tremendous side effects, namely helping us in the discussion on climate change, carbon neutrality, which would help us tremendously also in resources efficiency, which would help us tremendously in overcoming the limits of growth. And then we started to have, in September 2005, 15th and 16th of September, our first conference on the bioeconomy, the birth of the KBBE, of the European bioeconomy in Europe. And before we did that, I traveled around. I talked about this economy with selected countries, and I named them to you to show you in what way we were thinking. I went to the United States, to Canada, to Brazil, South Africa, India, China, and Russia. And we had contacts with the Australians. Now, what turned out in these discussions was amazing. It was the Chinese who jumped on the bandwagon. And what many people forgot, we were organizing the launch of the bioeconomy in Europe in the closest cooperation with the Chinese government. Just the day before, a big conference on the launch of the bioeconomy in China in Beijing happened. And 1 day later, we had it in Brussels. The big difference was, in Beijing you had 4,000 people, in Brussels we had 400. But the Chinese Minister of Science and Research and Commissioner Potočnik were exchanging via satellites greetings. I still have the letters, and I still have the speeches with me. In case there's a commemorative service, I'm going to publish that. So it was very interesting, because the Chinese immediately jumped on this bandwagon because they wanted to have it as a driver for their next 5 years program, which started on the 1st of January 2006 and went until 2011. And I can show you and demonstrate you the documents of the Communist Party in Beijing, in which the bioeconomy plays the leading role, and the Chinese claimed that they had already the oldest bioeconomy in the world. That's very typical for them. But they did it, and maybe they are right. So what also happened, and was extremely interesting, I want to give that as food for thought for you, was that at this inauguration conference, we had very interesting speakers. One was a guy called Buzek, the former Prime Minister of Poland, who then became the first Polish President of the European Parliament a few years later, and who is now the ITRE committee boss. And he was giving the keynote speech on the elements from Eastern Europe. Very interesting. And then we had there the highest man of biotechnology in the Indian government, the State Secretary Ban. And his speech, because I had contacted them before as well, we didn't have a program with them, but his speech was remarkable because he openly declared that for us as an emerging country, India, the bioeconomy gives the biggest opportunity to overcome old hierarchical structures in science and research and technology, which we inherited from the British and the rest of the world, because we need to put an emphasis on interdisciplinarity, on integration, and also on value chains, which is something very unusual for our researchers and which is going to modernize our system. Bingo! And dear colleagues and friends, this is still true for today. And that's why I give you these examples before I'm coming to the future and also to the present. What happened afterwards was going very quickly. Commissioner Busquin gave me 2 billion euros. You know, before that we had practically nothing. The Germans took over in the year 2007 under their presidency a kind of content leadership with a so-called Cologne paper, which is still very valid today. And then the machinery went on, and I démissionné, I resigned, I retired because I was 65. But my successors did a great job. They continued. In the year 2010, we had the Belgian leadership very strongly. In the year 2012, the Commission, and that was important, changed their mind and changed the originally concept of the bioeconomy to be a concept for RTDI into a generic economic concept. That was, if I may say so, the so-called leap forward. And that is extremely important also for you, dear friends. We are today in a situation, 9 years after, which cannot anymore be compared with what we had today. We had at that time. We talk today about the relationship of the bioeconomy to the circular economy. We talk today about the relationship of the bioeconomy to industrial symbiosis, which was coming strongly in the industrial biotechnology, the white biotechnology in the year 2004, when we were discussing the bioeconomy. We are sure today that we are very close, much closer in any economy than there, to sustainability. And that's, dear colleagues, something we were never dreaming of in the year 2005. In 2005, we didn't talk about biomass. That came 2 years later. We didn't talk about biorefining. That came about 1.5 years later at a big conference, by the way, in Finland, under the Finnish presidency, where the Finnish also very quickly had understood that in their declining business in forestry and wood, in particularly in the area of the paper industry, where you had a strong competition with the United States and Asia, the bioeconomy might open new gates, new ways for diversifying their markets, their production portfolio, and their potentials. They were the quickest one, very quickly to understand, and for that reason they helped me tremendously. So today we have a very, very interesting movement. We just had precisely a week ago in Berlin a big conference in Germany on 1 year of our policy strategy, which started in 2013, what was happening in between. And the German government, with 3 ministers, had invited very high people, not only from Finland, but also from South Africa and Malaysia, because they were the countries which in the last 12 months had brought forward new projects and in particular new national strategies. And they reported at length how diversified the bioeconomy is in these different countries. For example, in South Africa, marine is driving enormously, and also some energy parts. In Finland, it's wood and forestry. No, everybody knows that. In Malaysia, it's palm oil and algae. Dear friends, I was completely flabbergasted when I heard that. You know, the algae, plankton biomass, the marine biomass around the southern seas is tremendously important in Asia, and they are working on it as well as on aquaculture. Very interesting for you, by the way, although the climate conditions are completely different, but there are some commonalities. So I want just to show you, you know, how quickly and dynamic the situation is and how quickly and dynamic the developments happen. And in this context, you are prepared to go ahead with your projects and your ideas. And I want to give you some ideas, if I may say so, inspiring ideas for the next hours today and tomorrow. First of all, I think that everything what you worked out is right, and it is very good. The ingredients for an excellent torte, for an excellent cake, or an excellent dish are simply on the table. What we have to do is to bake. And what to do is to find out what kind of bakery we want, which will taste best to those to whom we want to sell it. Don't underestimate that. We need, in the area of biorefining, which will be the core of the industrial development, we will need clearer pictures on who is going to fund and operate the production and what is the outcome and the expectation of the markets. These are the 2 poles. Between them, we have to act. Now, I also have very carefully looked through all the papers, and my first clear conclusion is you will, in this area of Europe, in this area of the planet, you will be more a resourced than a process-based bioeconomy. That is extremely important. It will be resource-based, not that much, you know, process-based, although from time to time you will need processing as well. Second, my second very, very important point is we have clearly a lot of potentials for adding values. You have a lot of various areas already identified in which you're shaping and emerging value chains. They need to be worked out. They need to be intensified, and then we need to think what kind of priorities are we going to put there, because that is also a very important conclusion. You will not be able to do everything at the same time. Forget it. You'll be lost. And in the end, you will just have here or there something. It will be really patchwork. So we really need to have a clear message on 4 or 5 big issues and then try to work it out, but say that there might be others coming. What is also very, very important for me is that, and that is my third conclusion, there are clearly activities which you can decide very quickly on, which are not costly. To establish a Western Nordic Union bioeconomy panel doesn't cost any money. You might have a little money for a secretariat, but it could be put and stick to something. So this could be very quickly decided. It might also exercise some pressure on the Nordic Union initiative in 2012 to establish an overall bioeconomy panel, because it's not yet there. But it should maybe coming if there is something in the Western Union which is coming to spring up. So that doesn't cost very much. So one could give maybe a little more information and put some deliberations in details on that, who could be there, from what area, etc., etc. So that could be quickly a concrete proposal to the governments. And in this respect, I want to give you one point as food for thought, which interestingly came up when I talked with the Finnish representative in this conference 1 week ago, talking to him that I'm coming here. He gave me one response. He said, Chris, when you come back, please tell me what the outcome is, because we in Finland also have Arctic regions, and we are very much interested in what they will do. Although it might be different with us than in the Faroe Islands, because we are not an island. Oh. Now, if this is the case, and it's very true that we have the Arctic bioeconomy, what is your relationship to another big area in the Nordic Union, which has very similar features, and this is Svalbard? It's an island. It has a lot of tourists. It is even more Nordic. It's even more in the north, but it will have a full feature point. To what extent will you have also relationship, very concrete, in all your conclusions with the Svalbard? So that is number 3 of my messages. It doesn't cost very much, have this bioeconomy council. A 4th point, which is also in the structural area, your proposal with respect to the Center of Excellence. Here I would not simply remain just proposing, we could have this or that. I would very concretely propose that there should be a small group of people put together, a task force, to work out within 6 months or 8 months concrete proposals for such a Center of Excellence. And what I can do is to help you, because we did the same in Germany with the establishment with the so-called Bioeconomy Science Center in Jülich, today with more than 1,000 researchers and 50 institutes. But dear friends, it took us 5 years in Germany. 5 years. Don't think and believe it will be easy to do so. And therefore, I would say start the earlier the possible, so that they are going to give you some concrete proposals with respect to what kind of Center of Excellence could it be? What will virtuality play for a role? Something, by the way, the New Zealanders are at this moment doing as well. And in New Zealand, the virtuality plays an enormous role, because the New Zealanders have the same problem as you are. They are 3 big islands, they are remote, and they also have very, very strong climate differences between the southern island and the northern one. Those who have been in this country, there are a lot of similarities to what you do here. So, and then also find out what about the funding and what about the content? Should that be more generic questions of research? Should they also do something with respect to operating a demonstration plant or something like that? So question to questions, but start and may really try make a concrete proposal for a group of people who then are supposed to elaborate a concrete proposal in the next 6 or 8 months. 5th point. And now it's coming to nitty-gritty. You have particular unique features which are different from the rest of Europe. You have to say that very clear. And this is where I would put most emphasis on. And the first one is fisheries. The fishery industry, which is different in the 3 parts. It's very strong in Iceland. It has, in the area of aquaculture, much more emphasis. In the Faroe Islands, it's still very poor. In Greenland, etc. We have no Greenland people here today. They'll come tomorrow. We should discuss that with them tomorrow. But the fishery industry is powerful. And if you include in the fishery industry the potentials of aquaculture, and if you look also on and identify also any kinds of value chain within the fishery, in particular putting emphasis on fishery waste, and also with the relationship of fish feed, which is a big, big issue all over the world, dear friends, all over the world. You have a lot of work to do in this first area and find out to what extent it is already ripe the time to say we want to have a demonstration or a prototype for a fish marine feedstock biorefining, which has a potential for these or that side streams, etc., etc. So aquaculture, fishery waste, strong emphasis in this area of Europe, together with the differentiated features in the three areas, could be one big priority. The second priority, I think, which is also very unique, and you say that also in your papers, is micro and macro algae. We must be very careful to what extent this is a hype at this moment, because everybody is working on algae. In Germany, we have even the Land Baden-Württemberg, which is known for Porsche, for Mercedes-Benz, for Stuttgart, etc., etc. They have their own strategy on the bioeconomy, by the way, with three priorities: biogas, second generation of lignocellulosic, you can forget that here, and the third one is optimizing algae. Optimizing algae, Baden-Württemberg, Stuttgart. Okay, but they know what they do. So very important to what extent macro and micro algae play a role here, also with respect to enzymatic development under very strange and particular circumstances, extramophile. Something very, very special in this country. So if you do that and say we also need probably a prototype for that, a demonstration facility where we have this marine, where we have this, let me say, seaweed biomass plus the necessary enzymes developed or bought at the beginning, etc. Dear friends, if you go ahead with that, you're really occupied. Believe me, because you need money for it, you need skills and people, you need location and agreement on different approaches you have in this part of Europe. And then you have something else which I would put as a second priority as such, and that is your bio-based tourism, which is very, very good and interesting. Okay, if you just have 1 million people in this island to visit you, if you look, we just discussed that this morning on Tenerife, you know, which is a little larger than you are with population, they have 5 million. So you still have air above you. You can even very strongly increase. But this bio-based tourism with a bioeconomy and particular products as a brand might be very interesting. Up to now, no one has done it. And I give you one example of what has gone in my profession. I was extremely impressed. And once, about, I think it was 2005 or 2006, I don't know, I had to go to Dubai for a very simple reason. Dubai wanted to develop camel milk as a dairy product. Camel milk has some very particular features, no cholesterol. Tastes very good, but it's very herb. It's very stringent, if I may say so, and also helps you tremendously against sunburn. And the Dubai government decided to cultivate the camel milk and to have a big camel farm with 30,000 camels, etc., etc., etc. The question was, to what extent could it be imported to powder, etc., etc. Now, what they then did, I lost it out of sight. I helped them a little. We arranged several things. These guys were in our program committee once, etc., as a kind of innovative food. What I found very interesting a few years later, that the camel milk farms existed, and now it comes. And the Dubai, also very important for tourism today because there's no more oil. That's a second generation of innovation, what they do now. Tourism. Whenever you are a tourist in Dubai in a hotel, you get a probe of camel milk. You get an open invitation in the hotel to have a camel milk for nothing. Now, these are all things in your country, you know, here in the Faroe, Greenland, and here, if you have tourists, they are in the hotel, why don't they get skir? Why don't they get fraja? You know, that was the mayonnaise, which we were giving the fourth place in the Ecotrophilia 3 weeks ago, where I was a jury member. You know, the first worldwide mayonnaise without eggs and without fat. Now, without eggs, you have already many products on the market, also in Germany, but both without eggs and without fat, you know, that's very good. So to have a kind of bio-based product with which you as a brand can make propaganda. Think about it. Simply think about it. And I can really imagine that there will be a few other points which come up. And the same, and that is also something which I would very strongly push in your region, to what extent will you be able, and that is a policy question, to what extent will you be able, by the establishment of the bioeconomy in this region, to help adapting and mitigating to global change? Very concrete question. I have not yet an answer. But why are you not also proposing within the Nordic Union a kind of task force or working group to enter into this such a discussion? So, I have not talked about the differentiation in wildlife, question of grazing, very controversial. You are abundant in good water. Dear friends, you should be grateful for that, even if the soil situation is bad here and could be much more improved. But maybe it comes. The lignocellulosic will not be the topic for you like in many other countries in Europe. But the question of the alginate in seaweed is something which you can concentrate on, which is similarities. The question of the right choice of wild livestock or of livestock, whether you have cattle, you have cows, whether you have lamb, you have sheep, or whether you have reindeer. Very interesting questions. I have no solution. But that could be, if I may say so, intensified in the discussion later on. And the same applies with the enormous important question of the long-term impact of climate change on the cultivation of particular plants and particular crops in this region of Europe, where I think a very close cooperation between the communities in climate change and the bioeconomy must be thought of. By the way, something which is still missing in Brussels. The people in my old directorate of environment, sustainability and climate are unfortunately not having very many contacts with the bioeconomy directorate. But that's a problem all over Europe still. And to overcome these silos, by the way, will be a very nice side effect also in your country. When I look on the various activities described in your papers between Akureyri, between Reykjavik and other places, think about bioeconomy clusters in all these regions to be worked out. Mechanisms of exchange of information. And also make a kind of master plan. That is a very simple suggestion. A kind of master plan between the three regions in this part of Europe to go to international meetings to connect your knowledge with the emerging knowledge of others. There are so many international conferences on the bioeconomy in Europe, not only in Brussels, but everywhere, and also in Canada, in the United States, etc. You are too small to go to each of these conferences. Why don't you have a kind of connecting place where all the information of these international venues are collected, made known, and then you distribute your attendance. You say, we can't go. Who is going? Can you not also represent us there? Etc., etc. A very simple, I would say trivial suggestion. But you must be realistic. You will not be able to do everything and to be everywhere. So this is also part, very simple. You need not to invest very much money in it. It's a program and it's a choice of who is going to do what. Some telephone calls, not only emails, but sometimes telephone calls which are much more sympathetic and nicer, if I may say so. And that could be a very interesting side effect also in getting together things which are belonging together as well. So these are some, if I may say so, not wood, but food for thought for our discussion today. And I'm again very happy to be here. In case you are really successful with working out an action plan and a strategy, a big part of Europe will be added to those parts of Europe where you have already a strategy on the bioeconomy. As the Commissioner Gagan-Quinn said, 16 out of the 28 member states have declared already the bioeconomy to be one of their priorities for receiving money out of their structural funds. 16 out of 28. Okay, what are we doing with the rest? Big and good question. But that is much more than nothing. And I hope very much that this will more than ever drive this development for the good for the planet. Thank you very much.